Reign. Chapter 5. Reign and character of Mehmet II. Siege and conquest of Constantinople, further conquests in Europe and Asia, repulse before Belgrade, conquest of the Crimea, unsuccessful attack on Rhodes, capture of Otranto, death of Mehmet. Mehmet II, surnamed by his countrymen the Conqueror, was aged 21 years when his father died. He heard of that event at Magnesia, whither the Grand Vizier had dispatched a courier to him from Adrianople. He instantly sprang on an Arab horse, and exclaiming, "Let those who love me follow me," galloped off towards the shore of the Hellespont. In a few days he was solemnly enthroned. His first act of sovereign authority showed that a different spirit to that of the generous Amurath would now wield the Ottoman power. Amurath had left a little son, a babe, still at the breast, by his second wife, a princess of Servia. Mohammed ordered his infant brother to the drowned in a bath, and the merciless command was executed at the very time when the unhappy mother, in ignorance of her child's doom, was offering her congratulations to the murderer on his accession. Mahomet perceived the horror which the atrocity of this deed caused among his subjects, and he sought to avert it from himself by asserting that the officer who had drowned the infant prince had acted without orders, and by putting him to death for the pretended treason. But Mohammed himself, when in after years he declared the practice of royal fratricide to be necessary law of the state, confessed clearly his own share in this, the first murder of his deeply purpled reign. He had now fully outgrown the boyish feebleness of mind which had unfitted him for the throne when twice placed on it by his father 6 years before. For craft, capacity, and courage he ranks among the highest of the Ottoman sultans. His merits also as a far-sighted statesman, and his power of mind as a legislator, are as undeniable as are his military talents. He was only keenly sensible to all intellectual gratifications, and he was himself possessed of unusually high literary abilities and attainments. Yet with all these qualities and we find combined in him an amount of cruelty, perfidy, and revolting sensuality such as seldom stain human nature in the same individual. 3 years before Mohammed II was girt with the schemata of Osman, Constantine XI was crowned Emperor of Constantinople, a prince whose heroism towards the sunset glory on the close of the long-clouded series of the Byzantine annals. The Roman Empire of the East was now shrunk to a few towns and a scanty district beyond the walls of the capital city, but that city was itself a prize of sufficient splendor to tempt the ambition and excite the hostility of a less aspiring and unscrupulous spirit than that of the son of Amurath. The Ottomans felt that Constantinople was the true natural capital of their empire. While it was in the hands of the Others, the communication between their European and their Asiatic provinces could never be secure. Its acquisition by themselves would consolidate their power, and invest them with the majesty that still lingered round those walls, which had encircled the chosen seat of Roman Empire for nearly 1100 years. The imprudence of Constantine, who seems to have judged the character of Mohammed from the inability to reign which he had shown at the premature age of 14, hastened the hostility of the young sultan. Constantine sent an embassy demanding the augmentation of a stipend which was paid to the Byzantine court for the maintenance of the descendant of Suleiman, Sultan Bayezid's eldest son. This personage, who was named Orhan, had long been in apparent retirement but real custody at Constantinople, and the ambassadors hinted that if their demands were not complied with, the Greek emperor would immediately set him loose to compete with Mahomet for the Turkish throne. Mahomet, who at this time was engaged in quelling some disturbances in Asia Minor, answered with simulated courtesy, but the old Grand Vizier Khalil warned the Byzantines with indignant vehemence of the folly of their conduct and of the difference which they would soon experience between the fierce ambition of the young sultan and the mild forbearance of his predecessor. Mohammed had indeed been bent all his energies on effecting the conquest of the Greek capital, and he resolved to secure himself against any interruption or division of his forces while engaged in that great enterprise. He provided for the full security of his territories in Asia. He made a truce of 3 years with Huniades, which guaranteed him from all attacks from the north in Europe, and he then contemptuously drove evade the imperial agents who received the revenues of the lands allotted for the maintenance of Orhan and began to contract a fortress of the European side of the Bosphorus, about 5 miles above Constantinople, at a place where the channel is narrowest and the immediately opposite one that had been built by Bayezid Yildirim on the Asiatic shore. Constantine remonstrated in vain against these evident preparations for the blockade of his city, and the Ottoman employed in the work were encouraged to commit acts of violence against the Greek peasantry, which soon led a conflict between armed bands and either side. Constantine closed the gates of his city in alarm, and sent another embassy of remonstrance to the Sultan, who replied by a declaration of war, and it was evident that the death struggle in the Greek Empire was now fast approaching. Each party employed the autumn and winter of 1452 in earnest preparation for the siege which was to be urged by the one and resisted by the other in the coming spring. Mohammed collected the best troops of his empire at Adrianople, but much more than mere numbers of soldiery, however well disciplined and armed for the skirmish, for the battlefield was requested for the capture of the great and strong city of Constantinople. Artillery had for some time previously been employed both by Turkish and Christian armies, but Mohammed now prepared a more numerous and formidable park of cannon than had ever before been seen in warfare. An Hungarian engineer named Urban had abandoned the thankless service and scanty pay of the Greeks for the rich rewards and honors with which the Sultan rewarded all who aided him in his conquest. Urban Urban cast a monster cannon for the Turks, which was the object both of their admiration and terror. Other guns, of less imposing magnitude, but probably the greater efficiency, were prepared, and ammunition and military stores of every description, and the means of transport were collected on an equally ample scale. But Mahomet did not merely heap together the materials of war with the ostentatious profusion so common in oriental rulers. He arranged also provided for the right use of all in the keen spirit of skilful combination which we admire in the campaigns of Caesar and Napoleon. He was almost incessantly occupied in strong tracing and discussing with his officers plans of the city of his intended lines, the best positions for his batteries and magazines, of the spots where mines might be driven with most effect, and of the posts which, which each division of his troops should occupy. In the devoted city, the emperor, which with equal ability but far different feelings, collected the poor resources of his own remnant of empire and the scanty succors of the Western nations of the defense. The efforts which he had made to bring the Greek Church into communion with the Church of Rome as the price of the cordial and effectual support against the Mohammedans had alienated his own subjects from him, and the bigoted priests of Byzantium, when called on by the emperor to contribute their treasures and arm in the defense in their national independence, replied by reveling him as a heretic. The, the lay leader of the Orthodox Greeks, the Grand Duke Notaras, openly avowed that he would rather see the turban of the Sultan than the tiara of the Pope in Constantinople. Only 6,000 Greeks out of a population of 100,000 took any part in the defense in the city, and the emperor was obliged to leave even this under the command of the faction's notaras, whose ecclesiastical zeal showed itself in violent dissensions instead of cordial military cooperation with the chief of the Latin auxiliaries. These auxiliaries were partly contributed by the Pope, who sent Cardinal Isidore with a small body of veteran troops, and some pecuniary aid of the Greek emperor. The Italian and the Spanish commercial cities that traded with Constantinople showed their interest in their fate by sending contingents to her defense. Bands of Aragonese, of Catalans, and of Venetians gave assistance to Constantinople, which their skill and bravery made of great value. Though their numbers were but small, his most important auxiliary was the Genoese commander, John Giustiniani, who arrived with 2 galleys and 300 chosen men a little before the commencement of the siege. Altogether, Constantine had a garrison of about 9,000 troops to defend walls 14 miles in extent, the whole landward part of which, for a space of 5 miles, was certain to be attacked by the Turkish troops. The fortification, built in ancient times and for other systems of warfare, were ill adapted to have heavily cannon placed and worked on them, and many places had been suffered to become dilapidated. Still, amid all this difficulty and distress, Constantine did his duty to his country and his creed. No means of restoring or improving the defense were neglected, which his own military skill and that of his Latin allies could suggest. and which his ill-supplied treasury, and his disloyal subjects would enable him to supply. But the patriotism and even the genius of the single ruler are vain to save the people that will not save themselves. The Greeks had long been ripe for slavery, nor could their fall be further delayed.